For a long, long time, the world has run on a pretty simple idea. What happens on Wall Street basically sets the pace for the global economy. But what if I told you that's not really the case anymore? Because today, the real pulse of the global financial system, well, it's dictated by what happens in Beijing. And a recent move China made sent a massive shockwave through the markets, pulling back the curtain on a silent war that's been going on for decades.
And bam, it all just came to a head with this one single statement. When China announced new restrictions on exporting critical minerals, Donald Trump's reaction was, let's say, not subtle. He didn't call it a trade spat, he didn't call it a dispute, he called it a war. And that one word, it just perfectly captures the seriousness of the shift that we are all watching happen in real time.
And look, this wasn't just some political tough talk. The impact was very real, and it was immediate. That number you see, -3%, that was the hit the NASDAQ index took in a single day, right after China's announcement. It was this cold, hard signal that the levers of industrial power, controlling actual physical stuff, can now set off a financial earthquake on Wall Street. The two worlds are not separate anymore, not by a long shot.
So, the big question is, how did we get here? I mean, this market shock wasn't just some random event. No way. This was the moment that a very deliberate, very patient, multi-decade strategy for global dominance, one that's been playing out just under the surface, finally stepped into the light.
You see, if you really want to understand why one little trade announcement from Beijing can make the entire global market tremble, you have to understand the master plan. We're about to peel back the layers on how China systematically put itself in a position to control the most critical industry of the 21st century. We're talking about the tech that's going to power literally everything.
And at the heart of this entire thing, it's a meticulously executed 5-phase strategy. Think of it like a blueprint, a playbook for how to go from being a follower in the global industrial order to becoming the undisputed leader, one strategic step at a time.
And here is that blueprint. It's actually pretty brilliant in its simplicity. First, you control the raw materials. Then, you master the technology to turn those materials into something valuable. After that, you use that advantage to conquer global markets. Along the way, you absorb foreign tech to jump ahead of your rivals. And finally, you get to set the new rules of the game for everybody else. So let's see how they actually pulled this off. Okay, so phase 1 was all about building what some have called a mineral empire. For 20 years, China was quietly getting control over not just digging up minerals like lithium, cobalt, and graphite, but, and this is the crucial part, the refining of them. So what's the result today? Well, you literally cannot build an electric vehicle battery anywhere in the world without the supply chain running through China, full stop. And that makes those export restrictions an incredibly powerful weapon.
Now, controlling the ingredients wasn't enough. They wanted to own the whole recipe. And that's the huge shift this represents. China went from being the world's factory, just assembling things for other people, to becoming the world's industrial brain, actually owning the core ideas and the intellectual property.
And hey, this isn't just a theory, right? We're talking about real-world giants like CATL and BYD. These Chinese companies are now the biggest battery manufacturers on the planet. They don't just build the batteries, they own the patents for the tech that goes inside the electric cars being built in Europe and America. They absolutely mastered the technology.
So how did they do that so fast? Well, for that, we have to look at one of the most brilliant, some might say ruthless strategic plays of the last decade. It involves a Western icon, Tesla, and what was basically an act of industrial intelligence that was disguised as a simple business deal. This timeline just tells the entire story. Back in 2019, China gives Tesla a deal that was unheard of. You can own 100% of your Gigafactory in Shanghai. Amazing, right? But there was one little condition. Tesla had to use a local Chinese supply chain. This basically gave hundreds of Chinese companies a masterclass in Tesla's tech. And by 2024, those same suppliers had become Tesla's fiercest rivals, using everything they learned to build tech that now, in some cases, is even better.
So what's the final outcome here? It's pretty clear. China played the long game. They used Tesla as a bridge to transfer, absorb, and then ultimately leapfrog Western technology. Sure, Tesla got access to a massive market, but in the process, it gave away its technological crown and is now dependent on the very supply chain it helped build for its rivals. Okay, so when a giant like this shifts its weight, the ground starts to shake, right? And that's exactly what's happening now in the global financial system. This massive shift in industrial power is causing tremors, and it's starting to challenge the very foundation of what we even think of as money.
Which leads us to this massive, fundamental question.
For the last 50 years or so, the entire world of trade has been built on the petrodollar, the idea that oil is bought and sold in US dollars. But what happens if the world's most important new industrial supply chains, like for batteries, are no longer priced in dollars? What happens next?
And this chart, wow, it illustrates the response perfectly. Central banks, especially in places like China, Russia, and Turkey, are buying physical gold at a rate we have not seen since the end of World War II. They're hedging their bets. They're preparing for a world where the dollar might not be the undisputed king anymore, and they're stocking up on the one asset that's held its value for thousands of years.
All of this is leading to a fascinating new idea that's starting to emerge: the lithium gold standard. The concept is that real economic power in this new world isn't going to come from complex financial products alone. Now, it's going to come from controlling the essential minerals that power the green revolution, all backed up by the timeless security of physical gold.
So where does all of this leave us? It's pretty obvious this is way bigger than a trade dispute. This is a fundamental rewrite of who holds power in the world. So let's take a look at the final scorecard, as things stand right now.
All right, let's break it down. When it comes to key minerals, China has dominant control. The West is dependent. On battery technology, China is now the leading innovator. The West is playing catch-up. And when it comes to getting into the market, China is now the one setting the terms, and Western companies are the ones facing conditions.
When you put it all together, the conclusion is kind of inescapable. China has methodically taken control of every single critical link in the chain, from the mines that dig up the minerals, to the factories that build the batteries, to the markets that sell the cars, and even to the gold that might back the whole system. All roads now lead to Beijing.
And so we end with what might be the central question of our time. This isn't just about who makes the next smartphone or the next electric car. This is a battle over who gets to define what economic power even means. And while politicians are debating in Washington, a new chapter of global history is being written on the ground in Shanghai. The only real question left is, who's going to write the next one?